Our guest today is the Congresswoman from Illinois' 9th Congressional District. Prior to her election to Congress in 1998, she served for 8 years in the Illinois General Assembly. Our guest today is a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Intelligence Committee. Her top priority in Congress is to provide universal health care coverage for all Americans. Our guest today graduated from the University of Illinois and lives in Evanston. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the City Club of Chicago, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. Jan?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, thank you. Thank you. Wow, thank you so much. What a warm welcome. I appreciate that introduction, Jay, and I'm so glad to be here with so many of my friends and new people. You made some introductions. I want to introduce a couple relatives that are here of mine. My relative, Nancy Cohn, one of the great fundraisers in the whole world. And the person with whom I share grandchildren, Dennis Hart is here. He's the other side of the family, not my husband or anything. Well, you know, it's too hard to explain. I want to make a few points and then leave plenty of time for questions. One is, this is a very exciting campaign season for us here in Illinois. We have lots of congressional races. I'm going to focus on that. There are lots of other great races happening, but I want to just mention the Congress. I said to Ram the other day, I said, you know, Ram, our reputation is on the line. If we don't win some of these, we're in big trouble. There are a number of competitive districts and open seats, and in fact, the Tribune had a little headline that said Illinois is called ground zero in 08 battle for Congress. There's a lot of places that are, but Illinois is certainly very important. There'll be a competitive race for in Melissa Bean's district. Mark Kirk is opposed by my candidate. That's the only one I'm going to mention, Dan Seals. Thank you. Jerry Weller, trying to convince your colleague, Debbie Halverson, to get in that race, Carol. We have, because Jerry's retiring, Dennis Hastert's seat. You know, more and more of the suburban districts are trending Democratic. We want to take advantage of that. And we do have a candidate, Bill Foster, there. Ray LaHood in Peoria, a relatively moderate Republican who's retiring. And those are the retirements that we're seeing right now in the Congress. People, more middle-of-the-road Republicans who are retiring. We have the prospect of a really excellent candidate down there, and of course, where Peter Roskam's district is competitive as well. So we'll be working in all those districts. One of the things I pride myself on is that we have built a real organization in the 9th Congressional District. Certainly I, never take any race of mine for granted, but we also have the capacity to organize lots of people who can go to districts all over this state and all over the country, really. Sent a lot of people to Wisconsin when Kerry was running. And in fact, the governor of Wisconsin thanked me for the people that we sent. And so we're looking forward. My political director, Alex Armour, is here. I have a number of staff people here. And so we're going to be very active in these campaigns. I think this is going to be a great year for Democrats, and I can't quite understand the national strategy of the Republicans right now. When I look at the positions that they're asking their members to take in Congress, it looks to me like they are leading Republicans over the cliff. And particularly on the issue of the war, I want to talk a bit about that. I did go to Iraq this summer, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and have since been doing a lot of talking. I got the preview of the Petraeus-Crocker show in Washington, and I know that may sound disrespectful, but I want to tell you that the trips for members of Congress are so controlled and so scripted that it's hard to really know what is reality, because every minute is presented in the most favorable way in favor of the war. But the momentum against this war in Iraq outside of the Congress is very clear. The American people are done with this war. They're looking at this war now in the rearview mirror. A majority want, actually more than 60%, want a solid withdrawal date regardless of what happens in Iraq. And you notice that the polls didn't really move much after that great PR campaign that led up to and included the Petraeus-Crocker presentations. Not much change. People are done. Over 50% predicted that the Petraeus would deliver a biased report and continue to think that. Afterwards, 57% said the Iraqi government is incapable of reaching benchmarks. But maybe even more importantly, if you look at the polling data on the Iraqis, what you find is that 70% of the Iraqis believe that this surge has worsened their security. That was every person that was interviewed in Baghdad and in Anbar province. Nearly half wanted us to leave immediately. And nearly 60% consider attacks on coalition forces, that is, on U.S. troops, to be okay, including all of the Sunnis that were interviewed and half of the Shiites. And so both in Iraq and in the United States, there's a great desire for this war to be over, for the U.S. military presence to be gone. When I was in Iraq, although Petraeus is trying to tell a slightly different story of what he said to me and that I have carefully noted in my notes from that meeting, was that we would be in Iraq, the military would be in Iraq 9 to 10 years. Now, the 9th Congressional District, people get cranky thinking about 9 to 10 months. They want out and out right away. And as I said, most Americans want a very clear withdrawal date. They are not thinking about a military presence for 9 to 10 years, nor are the Iraqis. I'm going to come back to the war. But the war has greater implications even than that war itself, because we're spending right now, in the time that you're here, it's $12 million every hour, about $10 billion every month. So those of you who have businesses, part of organizations, think about what that kind of money, an hour in Iraq, might mean. Those of you who are involved in government, the kinds of services that could be provided. And in fact, I have polling data from Peter Hart Research to look at that connection. When people were first asked, let me get this one of his slides out here, what they think. When you hear that President Bush will veto several of the Democrats' appropriations bills, who are you more inclined to side with on this issue? And what it says is the Democrats say their bills make responsible and necessary investments in important priorities that the Bush administration has shortchanged. Democrats are ahead in that about 6%. But when you list the kinds of things like veterans' health care or homeland security or children's health insurance as priorities, or a number of the social programs that people care about, as compared to the money that's being spent in Iraq, the Democrats' approval moves up to 26 points ahead. So if you connect this issue, like people thinking about why why don't I have enough money to send my kids to college or get my children health care? And why are veterans being shortchanged? And why is that bridge falling in Minnesota? And say it's because all this money is going to Iraq, at least in part because of that. There's also the tax breaks for the wealthy. But then people say that this war especially is the wrong priority for the United States of America. My trip to Iraq has given me a platform to speak a lot about the war and to do lots of publicity. One of the things I think we were successfully able to do, even before Petraeus gave his report, was to talk about how these kinds of presentations, this one in particular, has been so cherry-picked to give the best impression of what is going on in Iraq. This was up against the National Intelligence Estimate, which reported that levels of overall violence, including casualties and attacks on civilians, remain high. Iraq's sectarian groups remain unreconciled. The Al-Qaeda in Iraq, it retains its ability to conduct high-profile attacks. Political leaders are unable to govern effectively. When I went to Iraq, one of our first meetings was with the vice president of the country, and he said to us that we, Iraq, would not be reconciled before this September, certainly, and not before next September. And his voice sort of drifted off as to it was completely unclear when there would be any kind of reconciliation. So the National Intelligence Estimate, the report by General James Jones that reported that the Interior Ministry is completely dysfunctional and sectarian, and the Iraqi National Police ought to be essentially scrapped, and that the number of Iraqi units available to operate independently has actually dropped from 10 in March to 6 in July. We are looking at a deteriorating situation in Iraq. We're also looking at a humanitarian crisis right now, where you've got 2 million internally displaced people in Iraq, 2 million who have left the country, including probably just about everybody that would be needed there to actually put a real government together. But when Petraeus reported on a decrease in ethno-sectarian violence, what he did not count, unbelievably, was the Shia-on-Shia violence, which is plaguing the south of the country, the Sunni-on-Sunni violence. They didn't count any car bombs. They didn't count the large-scale bombing when the Yazidis, that religious group in the north, 500 people were killed. And they only counted people who were shot in the back of the head and not in the front of the head. I'm not kidding. I thought it was a joke at first, because they consider a shot in the front of the head is a crime. In the back of the head would be sectarian violence. So this is the level to which they have gone to present the rosiest picture that they could. So we are now being asked as Americans to stick with the president and stay the course. And the only people that seem to even potentially be buying, and this is what I don't understand about the Republican strategy, are members of Congress. And I'm waiting for that date, and I think it will come when they decide to leave this sinking ship. After all, Bush isn't running again. The polls are clear, and by the way, independents and Republicans as well, it's just sort of the hardcore Bush supporters that are sticking with this war. You have to believe that there is a point, because the hard date in all of this, we may not have a hard date for withdrawal from Iraq, but there is a hard date, and that is November 2008. So we've been having lots of discussions. My friend Marilyn Katz, who has led an anti-war effort here in the Chicago area, Joe Moore, who put together Cities for Peace, cities, 237, is it, around the country that now have passed resolutions talking about ending this war. How do we translate this momentum that is growing out into the country to begin that, to create that tipping point and begin to have members of Congress who are going to go our way? Now, we do have a majority in the House of Representatives, and we have set a firm withdrawal date. And it is true that in the Senate, almost all the Democrats are there, not quite, but we don't have the 60 votes that it really takes to pass a bill. But nobody wants to hear whining about how it's not really, we don't really have a majority and we don't really have the votes. What people want to see right now is action. And I think the reason that the whole Congress, including the Democrats, although we're ahead, are held in low esteem is because people are very impatient with the lack of action. And so I think it is very important, and I'm going to be going back and being on a small message team that the speaker invited me to be on, to try and figure out with the grassroots organizations and individuals how we can more effectively move this along to end the war, because that is going to be the issue in the 2008 elections, whether or not it's just the war itself or it's how it's impacting all of our domestic priorities. There's just one other thing I want to talk to you about, and that is my concern about the shredding of the Constitution that we've seen this administration engage in. Civil liberties issues, which I think all of us ought to be really concerned about. A bill passed right before the August recess, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, giving new powers. This is a new version, amendments to the FISA Act, giving new powers to the administration, to the Attorney General, to the Director of National Intelligence to spy on Americans without going before any court at all. I was particularly concerned because at the time the Attorney General was Alberto Gonzales, who I testified before the Intelligence Committee. While I won't go into details for obvious reasons about that, it became very clear to me that he believes in his heart that the President of the United States, both because of the Constitution and because of the use of force resolution that was passed in October of 2002, can do anything. Can do anything, is justified in anything that he wants to look at of your private information. So in the Intelligence Committee, I've really drilled down, really tried to focus on the issue of of civil liberties. And the fact that habeas corpus, the right to protest your detention and to be charged, which is such a precious right to all freedom-loving people. It was in the Magna Carta and is embodied in our ethic about who we are ourselves, that it would be taken away from people is just unimaginable to me, but we actually have done it. And I've also really focused now on interrogations, detentions, and rendition. The President admitted to the existence of these, what we call black sites, where people are held. We don't know where they are. And you know, when I'm newly on the Intelligence Committee, Nancy Pelosi called me at the beginning of the session and asked if I would serve my country on the Intelligence Committee. Well, actually, I thought about it before quickly answering, because I was concerned that once on the Intelligence Committee, even though much of what I know, you know from CNN or wherever, you can't talk about. And so as an advocate in so many ways, I was a bit concerned about it, but decided that it was important because those intelligence committees, the House and Senate, are the Senate, the House, the public, because we're the only ones who know this. And so it's an enormous responsibility. But so the CIA invited me over to Langley to visit, and I brought with me a list of names from the, I think it was Human Rights Watch, it was, that had listed the names of people who essentially are disappeared, who no one knows where they are. And when I got there and I talked to the deputy director, I said, you know, when I went to China a number of years ago, I brought a list of names. I brought a list of names of people who were detained, we think were detained, but I never thought I would be bringing a list of people to leaders of my own government. And it was really quite a moment. I said, we're the United States of America. We don't disappear people. We don't do that. And yet, I have subsequently gotten some further information, but you know, it's frightening that I would even have to think about doing that. Actually, there was one other issue I wanted to mention to you that's been very important and high on my agenda, and that is the issue of private military contractors. Now, Blackwater, a company I've been looking at for a very long time, I've actually my only connection to this book that Jeremy Scahill, a wonderful journalist that writes for The Nation, is that I'm on the back cover praising the book. But I've been looking at this issue of private military contractors now for many years because they've been in Colombia and other places around the world. This is the outsourcing of our military. This was a planned, this was part of our former Secretary of Defense, I just had this senior moment. Thank you. Donald Rumsfeld. Sorry about that, Donald. I try to forget him. Anyway, when Rumsfeld talked about creating a total force and trimming down as a lean and mean military, he envisioned not only the Army, Navy, Marines, but also the contractors as part of our total force. Now, it's one thing. We could have, and I think we should have a debate about whether or not KBR, a subsidiary of Halliburton, provides meals, does KP duty, do we still want, you know, kind of Gomer Pyle doing KP duty kinds of image, or contract that out. I think that's a legitimate debate. But what is the role of these armed, on-the-ground people? Private companies, this company, Blackwater, has its own fixed-wing aircraft. It has two kinds of helicopters, including these little tiny ones that you may have seen pictures of in the newspaper. It has tanks that are as good or better than our troops are in, every possible kind of ammunition, and they say 20,000 people at the ready. Have war, will travel. This is a growing business. And who are they accountable to? And that's the big question right now that they've raised. This is not the first incident where they've killed, it seems they're alleged to have killed 8 to 20 people, civilians, who the Iraqis say did not fire on them. Their job is supposedly to provide security. Imagine now their ability to go out when they themselves have become the targets of the Iraqis. I mean, if you're in Iraq, do you want Blackwater or any of these, who, by the way, are indistinguishable to the people in Iraq or Afghanistan from our military, much as we can't tell the difference between the Shiites or Sunnis, who's the enemy, who's our friend, they associate all of them with us. These are the people who have changed the mission of our war, because they're the ones who sent 4 people into, I did it again, Fallujah, into Fallujah, where you remember the 4 of them were killed, they were hung from a bridge, they were humiliated and burned. They shouldn't have been sent on that mission. But that resulted in the Battle of Fallujah, where we lost 27 uniformed forces of our own. They changed the mission. They have changed the mission now, because for a while there was really a lockdown in the green zone where diplomats and intelligence officers couldn't even go out. There is a huge presence, and you know what? We don't know how many. No one knows how many. No one can give us an accurate count I'm talking as a member of the Intelligence Committee. Nobody really knows because they haven't figured out. Is it 20,000 of these armed security forces? Is it 50,000? Are there 130,000 contractors altogether? We don't count the dead. The only way we could get some picture of who is killed in Iraq that's a contractor is by going to the Department of Labor on who has filed for the essentially workman's compensation. And it's over 1,000 people that have been killed. But when we give the numbers of who's been killed in Iraq, we don't count those dead. We don't count them as our presence, our footprint in Iraq. When you hear about 160,000, we're going up to 172,000 when the surge is totally complete. We don't count an almost one-to-one ratio of private contractors. This is no oversight. This allows our government to some way have a hands-off relationship to these contractors. And believe me, they are among the winners in this war. There are always winners in war. And we are dealing with these large corporations, some of them brand new like Blackwater, who, playing off of its relationship to the government, Cofer Black, who was with the CIA, is now the vice chairman of Blackwater. Eric Prince, the Prince family, are very associated with all kinds of right-wing politics and the Bush administration. They had almost zip when this war started. They created this company, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar operation. This is a huge, growing enterprise across the world, and my final thing about it is that they are unaccountable. There is no clarity in the law of who they report to, who can prosecute them. 2 contractors in all of this war have been prosecuted. They essentially are operating with impunity in Iraq, creating more enemies for us, creating more insurgents and probably helping to recruit for al-Qaeda in Iraq, and no one is looking after them. And that's why I have legislation, the Iraq-Afghanistan Sunshine Act. There's a number of, I've attached an amendment to the Defense Authorization Bill and to the Intelligence Bill. But the Congress really has yet to have, and the American people, to have a full discussion on whether or not you really want these kinds of things contracted out to people who feel that it's okay to go around a war zone and shoot up people. This is really about the 6th incident of that happening, all of which included people that have died. So I want to call your, this is a fascinating and disturbing read, but even just following this story in the news, which I'm so happy is finally really getting out, I think is very important for all Americans to consider. So let me end there, get a glass of water, and answer your questions.
Hello, Kathy Posner, member of City Club. Before I ask my real question, I just wanted to say that I am a conservative Republican. I support the president. I just wanted to have at least one Republican in the room to support the president. Okay, now for my question. Wait, I couldn't hear what you said. I'm sure it was a Democratic thing, so we won't get into a thing. Anyway, my sister's with the State Department, and she happens to be a Democrat, though. I still love her. She just moved to Kosovo because of, we're looking for Kosovo to become an independent country from Serbia, and it worries me that my sister's in Kosovo, and I just wondered, especially with you being on the Intelligence Committee, what you are allowed to say and maybe make me feel comfortable about my sister being in Kosovo and not worried about her.
Yeah, I want to tell you, with so many, we have a hotspots briefing almost every week, and we have, because there are so many, we really have yet to get to Kosovo, and I really can't tell you. But the part of the concern is that so many important places around the world have really kind of fallen off the map because everything is concentrated right now all of our assets of all sorts, intelligence assets, military assets, are so concentrated there now that, in fact, even in terms of the military, we don't have a single battle-ready unit in the United States.
Okay, but right now there's not fighting going on in Kosovo. That's not my question. What do you think is going to happen in the UN when the 120-day cooling-off period?
I don't know. Actually, you probably know right now.
No, I don't know.
I mean,
I was hoping you knew something.
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Morgan Carter from Omnibus Television. And by the way, Congressman, we don't say senior moments as much as we say sometimers instead of all-timers.
Oh, okay,
Just a little lighter fare there. I got two quick questions. You mentioned that Illinois was a ground zero and there's some other swing elections. The first question is, how short are we of that 60 votes that's necessary? I don't know if you mentioned a number or not. That was my first question. And my second one, a little more difficult maybe, is there a credible, shall we say, charismatic Democrat candidate or somebody who can raise this torch against the war and more for domestic parity and spending? And you get my point, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have 51 Democrats, but it really takes the 60 votes. There are a number of retirements and open seats in the Senate, and again, I think the war is going to be the major issue in those seats. Yes, there are a number of people, including the Speaker of the House, who has made the ending this war a top priority. But honestly, I think it, as much as being leaders in the Congress, I really think it has to do with grassroots organizing and members of Congress hearing from their own constituents what they think. We're working hard on an inside and outside strategy, because at some point it's going to be every candidate for themselves. They're gonna decide not based on what the president is saying or even the leadership of their party. They're going to be looking at, what am I hearing at home, and am I going to lose the election because of my position on the war? So everywhere I go, I encourage people to, aggressively and forcefully contact their senators and representative. Mike Quigley.
Congresswoman, closer to home, at a recent meeting with U.S. EPA Region 5, before peace broke out with BP, there was some discussion about asking the industrial firms in the area to go beyond compliance with the Clean Water Act. Beyond that, is it time just to reopen the Clean Water Act?
Well, I think there's certainly are things that we need to do and that we are going to be doing in regard to clean water in this country. There are so many questions. I was just listening on the radio this morning about taking water from Lake Michigan, a subject that I think will come up as we move along in this period of global warming and pollution, on what we're going to do with our lake water. There are always amendments to the Clean Water Act that are being considered in my energy and commerce bill. But I think what the underlying question is the status quo enough? Is it enough just to get compliance for current law? Or at this time, when so much is at stake, do we have to make a decision to go further? And I think, again, that's an issue where I think Americans want us to do something to stave off the effects of global warming, and water is certainly a huge consideration.
I agree.
Water wars are going to make oil wars look pale.
Those were Paul Simon's last speeches. Your children won't fight over oil; they'll fight over water.
Right.
Thank you.
I agree. But that was a great victory anyway on BP. But we'll see. They didn't change the permit. They said we'll comply, but we won't change the permit. Yeah.
Thank you, Congressman. Your passion is evident, and I thank you for that. Mike Gonzalez, I'm a longtime City Club member. I also happen to be a trustee for Channel 11. So we have a film that I hope everybody gets a chance to see called The War. It's a film by Ken Burns.
Fabulous. Started last night.
It's a pretty intense portrayal of
Amazing.
the perspective from the Army folks or the Navy folks or service persons and their families.
In 4 cities, right?
It's ironic, perhaps, that the first segment was called The Necessary War. Now, can you answer the question of whether you feel, or do you have a sense of whether the American people or that core group that is supporting, and we have, I'm sure, some in the room, do we have a sense of our history so that we're not doomed to repeat historical mistakes?
Well, I think that's part of the tragedy is, I think, our failure to learn from the mistake from the Vietnam War. There's a revisionist thing going on right now that if only we would have stayed and not surrendered, we could have won the war. I mean, it's just incredible rewriting of history, in my view. This war was absolutely, and many people in this room knew it from the start, a tragic mistake. I think it will, as many others have said, go down in history as the worst foreign policy disaster of this country. And it's amazing even now that people aren't learning. As far as I'm concerned, the mission at first was regime change. Whoever wants to declare victory, let him declare victory. We had regime change. Now it's time to get out and have a diplomatic surge. Move on. Yeah.
Edward Cooper, City Club member. I'm as uncomfortable as many people here about having private security firms as mercenaries, but isn't the real answer, instead of complaining about it, we need to increase the size of the military so we don't need to outsource?
Yes, and many people, some people think that leads to the notion of a draft. But actually, I think rather than having initially made that decision to just privatize everything, I actually don't think that decision was made because otherwise we can't do what we want to do. I think it was part of a whole philosophy that we can just privatize many of the functions of government, and that we have to ask a hard question: what are inherently governmental functions? Those are words that are actually in the law, inherently governmental functions. And if those are important things that the troops should do, we could hire those. You understand, the people that are operating in these private firms are making about 10 times the amount of money that our uniformed personnel is making. So they'll have a guy next to them making $1,000 a day as a part of a security team of Blackwater. And next to them is, and right next to them, sometimes actually doing very similar things, is a guy making $24,000 a year. So I think part of the plan actually was to corporatize the war and corporatize government more. Yeah.
Congresswoman, my name is Tina Travalos-Nylene, and as you know, I'm a longtime Edgewater resident and community activist. And I had 2 questions. The first was, do you have a view, or do other legislators have a view about the proposal Senator Joe Biden is proposing regarding a political solution for Iraq?
He's talking about the 3, actually having a loose federation of 3 areas. I'll tell you what, it's pretty much happening. Part of this idea that neighborhoods in Baghdad, certain neighborhoods are being pointed to as safer, part of the reason for that is because neighborhoods that used to be Sunni and Shiite living together are now segregated. And people, Shiites are being forced to move to the south, et cetera. So there's a kind of ethnic cleansing, if you will, within the country going on. But right now, there is no vision of how that all comes together in some sort of bridging federation and government that actually can work together. I think it's going to take, I don't think it will happen naturally, and I'm not sure that certainly the United States can impose it. In order for the Iraqis to actually resolve these problems, I think we're going to have to have the participation of nations in the region. We're going to have the participation of the United Nations and all of our allies. The United States, I don't think, is in a position to initiate any of that right now. Could try. It'd be worth a try. So everyone is going to have to understand that a failed state in the middle of the Middle East is not a good thing for any of them. And that includes Iran. People are going to be flooding, refugees will be flooding across the border. It could provoke the Sunni countries, there's more of them than Shiite, to get into a spreading of this war. So the nations of the world have to participate in this right now. Maybe that is the end game, but I don't think that's clear now.
And my second question was about alternate energy sources. I wondered how much zeal you felt there was in Congress to promote alternative energy. Just on a small local level, my husband and I use an all-electric car to get around in the city. Zero gas, zero air pollution, and it's a great feeling about something that we actually can do. So that's my question about alternate energy and less reliance on oil.
One of the first things that the Speaker of the House did was to create a new committee on global warming and energy independence, actually irritating some of the chairmen of other existing committees, but to say how important this was. Then one of the first bills in our 100-hour agenda was to take tax breaks that have been given to big oil and designate those for the development of alternative energy. We are going to have a bill sometime this fall about CAFE standards, energy efficient standards for automobiles, and we are definitely going to be devoting more money to alternatives, which has stimulated a lot of battles now over nuclear as perhaps a clean energy, which is interesting. Questions about ethanol, whether it is the most energy efficient, of course, ethanol, which would be good for us in Illinois economically. And so we're definitely moving along that path to funding and investing in alternatives.
Meredith Meza-Spino, new City Club member. I have a question, sort of switching gears, about immigration. I was wondering what chance the DREAM Act has of passing this time and if you'll be supporting it.
Well, I support comprehensive immigration. Those people who may think that, and I think immigrants now have been are the new scapegoat for any feelings of economic insecurity. You don't have a job, blame an immigrant. Health care, education. I'm not saying that we don't have to control our borders, but I think we have to have comprehensive reform, even for those people who are so concerned, angry, afraid of immigrants. We need to bring 12 million people out of the shadows. Allowing them to be in this limbo status means they can be exploited and paid under minimum wage, can actually take jobs. If they're brought into the light and brought into the workforce, then they're going to have to abide by all of the national rules and perhaps even become organized labor and be paid more. And I think that they won't be threatening American jobs because they'll be undercutting them. My district is 52% are immigrants and children of immigrants. 60 languages are spoken at my high school. We're a beacon. If you want to know how people can live together and work together and eat together, we've got great restaurants. You come along Devon Avenue and in Edgewater and see how it works, and it's wonderful.
Dan Glicken, I'm a guest, researcher and writer. Can we somehow, as Democrats and as the city, communicate the idea that the world is undergoing a sea change of consciousness, that terrorists aren't just because they hate us and are jealous, it's because of 100 years of oil policy and other kinds of inheriting colonial empires that favor the fundamentalists one moment and the nationalists another, whichever suited the purposes of that kind of foreign policy, and that now there is no more room for that kind of thing, and that the domestic agenda that you're talking about is really part of our security now, to make us, again, a credible partner. And so it doesn't seem like cut and run. Obviously, we've made some mistakes. We're still going to defend ourselves where we have to, but we are undergoing a sea change of building up the kind of things the City Club and all the good organizations, domestic thing, is to make America the kind of credible partner that can maintain a peace.
Well, I certainly think there is a growing reality that the militarism, and I know you've said from the beginning, oil is part of it. Alan Greenspan now agrees with you officially that this war was in great part about oil. But I think there is this sense that this is not the way to earn respect for the United States of America, to make America safer. That the notion that we can use our power in a different way around the world isn't just being soft in the head. It's about how do we make America safer. I mean, if we were investing in ending preventable diseases, if we were helping to educate women and do loans for economic development or grants to people around the world, that we actually would be safer as a country. This is not some sort of a pipe dream. And if we were to live up to our own ideals of civil liberties and human rights, we would also be more respected and, I believe, safer as well. There's a lot of people who have seen the failures. It's kind of like, well, we've given war a chance. Now, give peace a chance, and let's see if there's not another way.
7 more minutes. So quick and quick.
Okay.
I'll be quick. Joyce Saxon, City Club Board of Governors. Question, Congresswoman, do the Blackwater people do any good at all? Did they guard your delegation while you were there so you felt safer? And do they report to like one person in the Pentagon? Who tells them where to go and what to do?
That's the thing. No, actually, that is an interesting question, because I did feel safe in Afghanistan. They weren't guarding delegations like mine in Iraq, but in Afghanistan, it was a Blackwater employee who drove around. I deliberately had my picture taken with him, but. They don't. It's the question of accountability. Who do they report to? Ultimately, this is a for-profit company, and the chain of command, they are not right now part of the chain of command. Blackwater contracts with the State Department, not with the Department of Defense. And so there are no clear rules about who, or laws about who they report to. And so at the end of the day, is it the CEO or is it the combatant commander on the ground? Whichever they choose, really. Yeah.
Michael Bauer, City Club member. Congresswoman, over the last 4 or 5 months, we've seen obviously a surge in the rhetoric from members of the administration, led by but not limited to the Vice President, against Iran, talking about increasingly what a threat Iran is to the United States. Are you concerned that the administration in its last 15 months might take military action against Iran? And if so, are there actions that the United States Congress can take to either slow this down or forestall this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important question, because it does seem that this administration operates without regard, because I think the majority of American people, while we all ought to be concerned about Iran, think that another military incursion would be a bad idea, even bombing. The thing that would happen there's a lot of dissent within Iran right now. If the United States were to attack Iran, it would galvanize support around Ahmadinejad, who really is a very bad leader and hostile to everything we stand for, and certainly hostile to the state of Israel and a Holocaust denier and all those things we're hearing now, because he may speak at Columbia University. But I think that once again to reach first for we really haven't tried enforcing sanctions to the extent that we can with our allies who aren't as cooperative as they might be in Europe. But we have not exhausted by any means those strategies, and I think that we need to pursue that route, and that it would further the disaster. It would be a separate and horrible disaster if we were to use military force at this time.
Good afternoon, Congresswoman. Barbara Olson, member of the City Club. Expanding your perspective from war to the world, you are one of 25 leaders who were profiled in a book called Apples Are Square. And in there you said the challenge of this new century and the destabilizing threats in the world is the incredible imbalance of wealth, the haves and the have-nots, the incredible poverty that we're seeing, particularly in third world countries. This is a huge problem, but do you see any way that this problem can be addressed, and is there anything you are doing about that?
Capacity is absolutely there. It's absolutely there. I mean, there is enough wealth, and I would say even excess wealth in many ways, that we could begin to bridge that gap between the rich and the poor, and again, for our own self-interest. When you've got islands of wealth surrounded by a sea of poverty, that is, I think, by definition, unstable and unsustainable. And so I think that, I absolutely do think that, you know, people think we spend way more than we do if you do surveys on foreign assistance. Actually, we fall pretty far down among the developed countries in the world in helping other countries. And I think that we do have to think of it as the world is flat in a sense that we as the superpower of the world have a great responsibility, not just out of the goodness of our heart, but because I think we're in peril if we don't.
Jeff Berkowitz, host and producer of Public Affairs, airing every Monday night at 8:30 p.m. Cable Channel 21, CAN TV. Congresswoman Schakowsky, the Washington Post reported on Friday that Israel's decision to attack Syria on September 6th, they reported of that decision to attack Syria on September 6th, bombing a suspected nuclear site set up in apparent collaboration with North Korea. And that decision came after Israel shared that intelligence with President Bush this summer, indicating that North Korea nuclear personnel were in Syria. And that was attributed, that story in the Post was attributed to U.S. government sources. Would you have supported that action by Israel? And I know you're a big supporter of Barack Obama, at least I believe that.
That's true. I'm a co-chair of his national campaign.
Would you think that Barack Obama, if he were president, would support that decision of Israel, either officially or unofficially?
Well, I'm hoping that in the Intelligence Committee, of course I won't be able to tell you even on your television show, what I hear, that I understand it better. What's interesting to me is that neither Syria nor Israel has been interested in talking about it. Syria has not condemned Israel for anything, and Israel is not acknowledging that this actually happened. And so I don't know. There's been leaks of this and that. What the circumstances would be, what the intelligence was that may have precipitated that particular action. And so it's hard for me at this point to say, since everything is so shrouded in mystery right now.
Would you say whether Senator Obama might support that if he were the president?
Well, I assure you that he would he support Israel attacking Syria? That's a ridiculous question to ask. I have no idea what happened, even it happened.
All over me. Let's give her a round of applause. You guys want to talk anymore? All right, hold on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Woo-hoo, thank you.
On behalf of the City Club, you have a City Club mug.
City Club mug, yes.
A one-year membership.
Yay.
And the history of the City Club of Chicago. Meeting adjourned. Give her a round of applause.